In 1949, the United States government spent years trying to prove that one grocery chain was a danger to the American economy. They took it to court. They lost. The company survived every legal attack the government could throw at it. So here's the question we're sitting with for the next 15 minutes. If the US government couldn't kill this company, what did? Not for cheating customers, not for selling something dangerous. The government's own lawyers had actually argued the opposite, that this company was too efficient, too well run, and too good at selling groceries cheaply, and that this somehow made it a criminal. You've probably never heard of this company, but at its peak, it was bigger than Walmart is today, relative to the economy around it. 1 in every $10 Americans spent on groceries went through its registers. It invented the supermarket as we know it. Self-service aisles, store brands, the whole model Walmart, Kroger, and Costco all copied. By 2015, it was gone, not sold, not renamed, liquidated in pieces after 156 years. This is the story of A&P, the company the US government couldn't beat, and the company that, decades later, beat itself. In 1859, 2 businessmen opened a small tea and coffee shop on Vesey Street in Manhattan. Nothing about it looked like the beginning of an empire. It was a storefront selling tea, coffee, and spices, cutting out the middlemen to sell direct at lower prices. A simple idea, but one that worked well enough that by 1869, with the Transcontinental Railroad just completed, they renamed the company the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. A&P for short. Here's where the story stops looking small. Under the founders' sons, who ran the company for decades after their father, A&P didn't just grow, it reinvented what a grocery store even was. Before A&P, buying groceries meant standing at a counter, telling a clerk what you wanted, and waiting while they fetched it for you, item by item, like visiting a pharmacy. A&P tore that model apart. They introduced standardized economy stores where customers could walk the aisles themselves and pick items off the shelf directly. The self-service model every grocery store on earth still uses today. That wasn't the only thing they invented. A&P built its own manufacturing operations, baking its own bread, roasting its own coffee under the brand 8 o'clock, running its own dairies, so it could sell private label products cheaper than any competitor's name brand goods. Sound familiar? It should. Every store brand product on every Walmart and Target shelf today is running the exact playbook A&P wrote 100 years earlier. By the 1920s and 1930s, the results were almost hard to believe. A&P operated more than 15,000 stores across the country. For comparison, Walmart today operates around 700 stores in the US. A&P wasn't just the largest grocery chain in America. From 1915 to 1975, 6 full decades, it was the single largest retailer of any kind in the entire United States. 1 in every $10 spent on groceries nationwide went through an A&P register. This is the part of the story where you'd expect things to keep going up forever. They didn't. And the reason they stopped is the strangest part of this entire story. Here's the twist almost nobody expects. The US government didn't go after A&P for cheating anyone. They went after A&P for being too efficient. By the 1940s, regulators had grown alarmed at just how much buying power A&P had accumulated. Because A&P purchased in such massive volume directly from farmers and suppliers, it could demand lower prices than any competitor could ever negotiate, and then pass those savings on to customers. Legally, this created something rare. Not a monopoly where one seller controls a market, but what's called a monopsony, a single buyer so dominant that it can dictate terms to an entire industry of suppliers. In 1946, the federal government won a criminal antitrust case against A&P. A civil case followed, arguing that A&P's low prices and private label strategy were unfairly crushing small, independent grocers who simply couldn't buy in the same volume or negotiate the same discounts. Sit with that for a second. A&P was formally punished in federal court for selling groceries too cheaply. The company fought back publicly, taking out full-page ads in over 2,000 newspapers across the country, defending itself. But the case sent an unmistakable message through the entire American retail industry. grow too dominant, and even doing right by your customers can become a legal liability. A&P survived the case, but it emerged from the 1940s and 50s more cautious, more defensive, and, as it turns out, dangerously unprepared for what was coming next. A country that was about to move to the suburbs, and a retail format about to leave A&P's entire store model behind. Before we move on, it's worth pausing on just how strange the A&P case really was, because it wasn't an isolated overreaction. It was part of an entire era of American antitrust enforcement, roughly from the 1940s through the 1970s, that legal historians still argue about today. During this period, U.S. regulators didn't just go after companies for price fixing or fraud. They went after companies for winning too decisively. IBM, AT&T, and A&P all faced major federal antitrust action during these decades, in each case at least partly because of how dominant they'd become, not because of clear evidence of consumer harm. Courts at the time leaned on a legal philosophy sometimes called structuralism, the idea that concentrated economic power is inherently dangerous to a free market and to democracy itself, regardless of whether the dominant company was actually behaving badly toward customers in the moment. Some historians and legal scholars defend this era as a necessary safeguard, a recognition that unchecked economic concentration, even when it delivers short-term benefits like A&P's lower prices, can eventually let one player dictate terms to an entire industry, squeezing out the small farmers and independent grocers who had no comparable leverage. From that view, the government wasn't punishing efficiency for its own sake. It was protecting a competitive marketplace over the long run, the same way it might regulate a utility or break up a monopoly, so that no single company could become powerful enough to answer to no one. Others, particularly a later generation of economists associated with the Chicago School in the 1970s and 80s, looked back at cases like A&P's and argued the opposite, that this entire era of antitrust enforcement was economically confused, punishing exactly the kind of efficiency and low pricing that antitrust law was supposed to protect in the first place. To this view, A&P wasn't a threat that needed to be reined in. It was antitrust law being turned almost backwards against the interests of the very consumers it was designed to protect. That debate never fully resolved, and it's still alive today, resurfacing anytime regulators look hard at a dominant company that customers seem happy with. Whichever side of it you land on, A&P's case remains one of the strangest artifacts of that argument, a company taken to federal court, in part, for the crime of selling groceries too cheaply. While A&P's founders were obsessively frugal, famously private, plow the profits back into the businessmen, one member of the family took the opposite path, and it's almost too strange to be true. The founder's grandson inherited a trust fund worth roughly $1.5 million a year as a child, and later an estate worth several $100 million when his uncle died. He worked briefly at A&P after graduating from Harvard, and then walked away from the family business almost entirely. What did he do instead? He funded Broadway plays and Hollywood films, including a stage production of Jane Eyre starring an actor years past his prime. He built an entire luxury resort from scratch on Paradise Island in the Bahamas. He founded his own art museum in Manhattan to showcase a personal collection critics largely dismissed. One deal after another failed to turn a profit. By the time he died in 2008 at age 97, most of that fortune, reportedly worth close to $500 million at its peak, was gone. It's a strange irony. The family, whose name was built on radical frugality and operational discipline, also produced an heir who became a case study in how fast a fortune can be spent by someone who never had to build it. But the more consequential failure wasn't happening in the Bahamas. It was happening in A&P's own stores, or rather, in the stores A&P never built. After World War II, America moved to the suburbs in massive numbers. A new retail format emerged to meet them there. The large format supermarket with parking lots, wider aisles, and a much bigger selection than A&P's small, standardized, urban economy stores had ever offered. Competitors like Kroger and Safeway embraced the shift immediately, building bigger stores in the new suburban shopping centers. A&P, The company that had invented the very idea of a modern grocery format hesitated. Its urban store network, once its greatest strength, had become a structural liability it was too slow to abandon. By 1972, A&P's leadership finally tried to fight back and made things dramatically worse. They launched a campaign called WEO, where economy originates. The plan was simple on paper: slash prices deeply across the board to win back market share from suburban competitors. In practice, it triggered a price war that A&P was fighting largely against itself. Margins collapsed. The company posted enormous losses. A&P had once won by being ruthlessly efficient. Now it was bleeding money trying to look cheap, without the operational advantage that had made its low prices sustainable in the first place. By the late 1970s, A&P was struggling badly enough that a German conglomerate, the Tengelmann Group, acquired a majority stake. The once dominant American retail icon was now, in large part, foreign-owned. The decline from here wasn't a single dramatic event. It was 40 years of a company that kept trying to patch a business model built for a country that no longer existed. By the 2000s, A&P was a shadow of the company that once defined how an entire nation bought food. Years of accumulated debt, outdated stores, and shrinking margins finally caught up with it. In December 2010, A&P filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, citing high labor costs, falling sales, and months of mounting losses. It emerged from that bankruptcy in 2012, restructured, smaller, still fighting. It didn't last. On July 20th, 2015, less than 5 years after its first bankruptcy, A&P filed again. In the restructuring industry, a second bankruptcy filing this soon after the first has an almost darkly funny nickname, a Chapter 22. Bankruptcy, Part 2. This time, there was no restructuring plan, there was only liquidation. Over the following months, A&P's remaining 20-some banners, A&P itself, along with names like Pathmark, Waldbaum's, and Food Emporium, chains most people didn't even realize were the same company, were sold off in pieces to competitors, or simply shut down. By November 2015, the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company ceased to exist. 156 years of continuous operation, the company that had once been America's largest retailer of any kind, ended not with a headline-grabbing collapse, but with store closures most Americans barely noticed. So here's the answer to the question from the very beginning. If the government couldn't kill A&P, what did? A&P did. Specifically, a version of A&P from decades earlier. The version that once won by ripping up the old grocery model and replacing it with something radically cheaper. When the company panicked in 1972 and needed to fight back against suburban competitors, it didn't invent something new. It reached for the only weapon it had ever known: cut prices harder than anyone else. The exact same move that had built the company in 1859. Except this time, there was no structural advantage underneath it. Just a company copying its own younger self in a world that had already moved on. That's the part of this story worth remembering, and it applies far beyond grocery stores. The strategy that made you successful once doesn't automatically work forever, just because it's the strategy you already know how to run. An external attack, a competitor, a lawsuit, even the full weight of the US government is something you can see coming and fight. The far more dangerous threat is reaching for your own old playbook out of instinct, mistaking familiarity for strategy in a world it was never designed for anymore. Business schools now use the phrase "getting Kodak" to describe something similar, a company that keeps running its old playbook long after the game has changed. A&P is the other side of that same coin. If you want to see another American institution that built the rules of its own industry and then couldn't survive the world it created, let me know in the comments. That might be the next one we cover.